How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to an episode here on Let's Build Twitter. As always, I'm Ethan, or Unknown Coder, your favorite underqualified senior software engineer. And as always, if you guys do want access to that private repository, there is a link in the description down below. So that being said, let's go and talk about working on today. So we're going to go ahead and continue working on messages. And the next thing we need to go ahead and do is make it so whenever we click on this guy, we have like this new messages and stuff. And then we need like a list of all the conversations, but we don't actually have those conversations. So this episode, we're going to go ahead and hop in the backend, get conversations working. We're going to make a skeleton for messages, and then next episode come through and start filling out this modal. So with that being said, let's go and hop into the back end and get to work here. So like I mentioned, we're going to be working on the back end. We're going to go ahead and start out inside of our model today. Let's first go ahead and make a model called conversation. And actually, let's go ahead and just go into application users and close this, and we'll say space JC, and we'll go ahead and make a class this way. It'll be faster. And this will be inside the models, and then this is going to be called conversation. I always forget we have this. And then, so we're going to go ahead and make a conversation. And then here, that's going to be an @entity. And then we're going to go ahead and say that the name of our class or our table is going to be called conversations, because that's where we're going to be storing in there. And this is going to be a pretty simple entity here. We're going to have @ID. We're going to have, we're going to have and then generated maybe value. And then in here, we'll have strategy is equal to generation type dot identity, because this is what I have on all the other ones that actually work whenever and I broke this. There we go. This is the one that works whenever we actually add things in data SQL. So fingers crossed. And then finally, we'll just throw an @column on there. This one isn't necessary, obviously. We're going to name this equal to conversation underscore ID. This will be a private, maybe if I could type, integer, and then conversation ID. And then let's go ahead and make sure our generation type gets imported. It doesn't like to import this properly a lot of the time. There we go. So then we're going to have an @many to many. And this is going to be kind of like our conversation users. So we're going to have @join table as well. And inside of our join table, we'll have name equal to conversation, maybe conversation underscore user underscore junction. So it's going to relay our users to our conversations of our join columns, join columns equal to @join column. And here, name will equal to conversation underscore ID. And then we'll also have our inverse join columns and then join column. And here, maybe our name will equal to, and this is going to be user underscore ID. So it's going to go ahead and relate all these. This will be a list of application users. We'll have to go ahead and import both of these. And then this is going to be conversation users. So which users are involved in the conversation? We'll go ahead and import list from Java util, and it might just pick up the conversation users from the model package. And then there's just one more. @one to many. You probably could have called this one like many to many, but it is what it is. So this is going to be a private list of messages. Messages don't exist yet. We're going to go ahead and make this next. And then conversation message. We're not going to fully flesh out what the messages look like right now, but we'll get to that in another episode. Map by conversation. So let's go ahead and say space JC, and I'm going to go ahead and do this in the models again. And this is going to be our message model, and go ahead and create that message model. And we need @entity. And then this one again, name will equal to messages. And then in this, all we're going to go ahead and do is just set up an ID in the many to many or many to one to make it happy. So we'll also go ahead and say and I messed up the entity. I'll fix that @table. And then this one is where we put the name equal to messages. Let me fix this. Broke this. There we go. And then here, what we can go ahead and do is just add an @ID. And we'll go ahead and fix all this up later. Private integer message ID. I just want this so that our conversation isn't broken. And then @many to one. And then here we'll have an @join column. And then here we'll say name is equal to conversation underscore ID. So which conversation does it belong to? And nullable will equal to false. Okay. And then we'll have a private conversation conversation. Every message is going to have to be related to a conversation, and that's going to make it easier for us to kind of blast out to a whole bunch of different people. There we go. Now if we go back into our conversation, we can go ahead and get that fixed up. So now it shouldn't be mad about message anymore because it should be coming from our model package. And then all we need to do is say like public conversation, and I'm just going to have a no args because this is all our conversations are going to be. It's going to have our conversation message, which will have like all of our uses in it, and it'll also have this as well. So this is kind of redundant, but it is what it is. But basically with these two properties, we should have all the information that we need. And then we'll also, whenever we're creating this, we have to do a bunch of hoops and stuff to jump through. So we're not going to go ahead and make any special conversation constructor here. And then let's go and just set up getters and setters. So space CA, getters and setters, and then we'll go ahead and space CA. We'll go ahead and do hash code and equals. We'll do 1, 2, and 3. So we'll go ahead and add in the conversation ID, conversation user as a message. That's good to go. And then space CA to go ahead and generate a toString. Again, I don't think there's anything here that'll cause issues, maybe messages in the future, but if we get to that point, we'll deal with it. So again, we'll just add users, message, and ID, and we should be good to go. That is a very simple conversation model as well as a very simple message model. We're going to come back to the messages. So stay with me here. We'll get messages done, but right now I just want to get that modal working in the next episode, and we need to go ahead and be able to see different conversations. So with that being said, we're good to go on this front. Now we need to go ahead and set up our repository. So again, I'm going to say space JC. If you guys are in like IntelliJ or something, make a new class or interface however you want, and this should actually be an interface. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this menu and actually say space JI to make an interface. And we're going to put this in repositories, I believe. Fingers crossed that's right. And then we're also going to go ahead and call this conversation, repository, and then hit enter. And let me just double check that I put this in the right thing. Yes, I did. Cool. Because whenever I was playing around with this before, I put it in the wrong place. So here I'll say at repository. And then this is going to go ahead and extend JPA repository. Maybe. And here we're going to go ahead and have our conversation and integer. And let's go ahead and import our conversation. And in here, we're just going to have like one simple one. And it's to go ahead and find conversations that have user inside of them. So we're going to say list of conversation. And this is going to be find all by conversation users in. So basically we're going to go ahead and search by a list of conversation users. So list application user. I was going to try to import that, but I just absolutely whiffed. We'll import in a second. And users. So basically we're going to pass in a list of conversation users. And we're going to go ahead and try to find conversations that contain those users. So unfortunately, there's not like a good way to do like, I don't want to say like a distinct list, but like I tried doing it in a way that we can find like the exact set of users, the exact list of users, and it didn't quite work out the way that I wanted to. So next, whenever we get into our conversation service here, you're going to see we had to do a little bit of custom work to get it fully working. With that being said, let's go ahead and create our conversation service class. So space JC to create a class. This is in services, and this is going to be called conversation service, and I'm pretty sure I called it services. I'm just gonna double check. Okay, so here I'll have at service. We'll also have at transactional. I don't know that this is gonna do too much for us just because we're not making a bunch of database calls, but it is what it is. Private final. We're gonna have our conversation repository, conversation repository, and we'll have our private final and user service to find users, and it's not finding user service for some reason, so that's fun. User service, it might just be because we're already inside the user service repository or the package. And then we'll have at auto-wired, and this will be public conversation service maybe, and this will take in our conversation repository, and user service. We'll go ahead and set these up. Whoops, not user. And this dot conversation repository is equal to conversation repository, and this dot user service is equal to user service. I woke up not being able to type this morning. I'm sorry. There we go. So now we have all of that set up. Now let's go ahead and get our simple functions. So public list of conversations. We need to import conversations. It's going to be read all conversations with user. So we're going to find all the conversations that this user's in, integer user ID. Let's go and import the conversation and the list. So bring in list from Java util, go to conversation, bring in that. So here we'll have an application user, and we'll just call this user is equal to user service dot find. I think we actually call get by ID, and here this should throw an error or an exception that we can catch inside the user controller, so I'm not concerned about that. List of application user, and this is going to be user list is equal to list.of user, and this is because this is how we have to kind of search by like that list of users. And we'll say return conversation repository, and then this is going to be find all by conversation users in, pass in that user list, and if nothing pops up, we'll just return an empty array. It's not going to hurt anything. So there's that. So this one was like the simple one. Now the one that's, it's not really complicated, it's just more work. Next, we're going to go ahead and set up a public, and this is just going to return a singular conversation. This is going to be called read or create conversation. And here we're going to pass in a list of integers, which are the conversation user IDs. And the reason why I passed in user IDs is because I'm lazy. I could have passed in the entire users and skipped a step here, but whenever I'm working with Postman and stuff, I like to make it as simple as possible. So we're gonna have a list of application user to start out, and here we'll call this conversation users equal to user service. And I might have missed one. Find all users. I think I might have missed a step here, and this will be conversation user IDs. Or let me double check my code here and see if I did it next. No, I just straight up missed this somehow. So before we get too far, let's go back into our user service, and then this should be pretty simple. This is already a repository function that comes default, so we should just be able to say public list application user and then get all users by ID, and then we can pass in a list of integer, and then if I could spell integer right, and then user IDs. I don't remember exactly how we did this, but we should be able to say return user repo dot find all by ID, and then pass in the user IDs, and that should be fine. Let's just make sure that we spell everything right and bring in list, and this should be perfectly fine, I believe. Let's see. Cool. And then if we go back into our conversation service, this should be fine now. So back in the conversation user service, I think this is find all users by ID or something. Let's actually just delete this. I don't remember what I even called this. It was 2 seconds ago. But find, we might have called it get user by ID, get all user by ID. And I probably should have called that users, but it is what it is. So this will be conversation user IDs. No harm, no foul. It should be doing what it's supposed to do, so that's fine. I'm going to return null for a second, so this stops complaining. Let's go ahead and make sure we add our semicolon. So after our list of conversation user IDs, we're going to have a list of conversations. So we'll say not that, we'll say list conversation, and I can't spell conversation right. And we'll go ahead and call this conversations is equal to conversation repository dot find all by users in, and we'll go ahead and pass in conversation users like so. Now the issue here is this is again going to go ahead and grab all the conversations that our users are in. So there could be ones that we're not specifically looking for. We're looking specifically for the one with these specific user IDs. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to say conversation equal to null, and then we're going to loop through all of our conversations. So there's probably a better way to do this, but whatever. Int I equals 0. I is less than conversations. Stations dot size. and make sure I spelled conversations wrong. I'll have to fix that. Let's go and fix conversations. There we go. So now we can loop through all the conversations. If our user lists are the same, this is a function we need to set up. This will be conversations.get i.get and then conversation users, comma, our conversation users list. Then we're going to go ahead and just conversation is equal to conversations.get i. So now we need to go ahead and make this users list are the same. So this is just a private function that I have set up at the bottom that I basically stole from Stack Overflow. So private boolean and then users list are the same. And this is going to take in a list of application user, and we'll go call this list 1, and a list of application user. Whoops. And this will be called list 2. And it seems to work. If it stops working, I'll look for a new one. But this, we just need to return a new hash set. And this is going to be list 1 dot equals. And then this is going to be new hash set. And this is going to be list 2. So I don't know why this works, but whenever we used the tree sets before, it didn't work. But I've tested this out, it seems to be working, so I'm going to keep this as is. Basically, we're going to check to see if the list of conversation users inside one of the conversations that we found is the same. If it is, we'll go ahead and set that. Otherwise, at this point, if our conversation is still equal to null, whoops. So if conversation is equal to null at this point, then we'll go ahead and say conversation is equal to a new conversation. So go ahead and set that up, and we'll go ahead and say conversation dot set, and I can't spell right, conversation. We'll go ahead and set the conversation users to conversation users, and then we want to go ahead and say conversation is equal to conversation repository dot save, and we'll save that conversation. And then what we'll do at the bottom is we'll go ahead and return that conversation. Let's fix this. So basically, we'll check to see if the specific user list that we have is inside any of the conversations that we got back from that user. If it is, great, we'll go ahead and set the conversation to that list that that conversation that we found. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and just make a new conversation, save it, and return it. So that's everything inside our service. We just have a couple more things to do here. This is very simple. So now we need to go ahead and set up a DTO. And I don't remember, we just call it DTO. So now we'll go ahead and say space JC. We'll make a new class. We'll put this inside of DTO. And we're going to go ahead and call this find conversation request. This is going to be a very, very simple DTO. So here, all we're going to do is just have a private and list of integer. Want to import all this, that's fine. User IDs, and then literally all we're going to do is just make getter setters and all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and bring in our util here, and then we'll go ahead and say space CA. We'll go ahead and do constructor with nothing in it, and then we'll also do another constructor with our ID in it. Okay, and then we'll also go ahead and do our getters and setters. We'll do our hash code equals, which doesn't have that much in it, and then we'll do a toString for the heck of it. Why not? It's not going to hurt anything. There we go. So a very, very, very simple DTO to go ahead and get our request going. So now with that being said, let's go ahead and create one last class, the controller. So this will go inside controllers, and we'll go ahead and call this conversation controller. There we go. So as always, we'll say at rest controller, we'll say at request mapping to / conversation, and then inside we'll have a private conversation service, and we'll call this conversation like a type service. And I forgot the final one here, not that it's like gonna break our application, but I like to kind of keep things consistent. At auto-wired public conversation controller. And this will take in our conversation service. Conversation service. This dot conversation service is equal to conversation service. And then we're just gonna have two methods here. So I have it at get mapping to slash. And this is gonna go ahead and just get our conversations, like all of them. So this will be a list. And let's go ahead and import this, maybe. Okay, I guess we'll import it later because I can't find it. It should be at the top of the list. I don't know why it's never at the top of the list anymore. Application user, and this is going to be called get users conversations. This is going to have an at request param, and we'll go ahead and call this user ID, an integer user ID, except I might want to do it this way. Here we're just going to go ahead and return conversation service, and this is going to be read all conversations with users. We'll go ahead and pass in those users, that user ID that we got from the parameter. Then we just need to go ahead and import our list. If I can actually find the correct list from Java util, we can go ahead and import our application user, and then let's go ahead and import our auto wired. Let's see what's going on here. Read all conversation with user, return. What's going on with this? I guess I messed up the return type. This should not be application user. This should be conversation. Of course. Then let's get rid of application user. Cool. So that'll go ahead and get all the ones that are already created for us. Then we're also gonna have an at post mapping here to just slash. And this is going to bring back a application user. Oh my goodness, a conversation. And this is going to be get or create conversation. So it's going to be whenever we like click on a conversation or go ahead and create a new message thread. This is going to have an at request body of our find conversation request. Just going to go ahead and call that body. And we're going to go ahead and return conversation service dot and then read or create conversation body dot get user IDs. And that is that. So that should basically wrap up our code here. Like I said, this one should be somewhat shorter. So let's just go ahead and test this out by hopping into Postman and seeing what we can get here. So here in Postman, I'm already logged in, but I'll just log in and show you all the flow. So we have our login, we go to our token. So the first thing that we'd want to go and do is like create conversations so we can actually talk to people. So let's go ahead and put in our bearer token. Then let's say that me and Rick are starting a conversation. So if we go ahead and say create or find conversation, you see conversation ID 1. The conversation users are Rick and unknown coder. There's no conversation messages because I haven't sent anything back and forth yet. Then let's say that we have a group message between me, Rick, Morty, and Summer. So we go ahead and send that. You can see now we have conversation ID 2. We have Rick in there, we have Morty, we have Summer, and we have myself. So again, if I want to go ahead and find those specific messages with just me and Rick, we should be able to say 5-1, and hopefully it just sends that back 1 and 5. And then if we want the one with all of us, we can do that. And then if we want to go ahead and get all of my messages or all of my conversations, basically, we can go ahead and say, hey, here is our get request conversations user ID 5. We have our bearer token, and then we can go ahead and let's just go make sure that bearer token is proper because I just logged in again. And we can go ahead and hit send. We can see we have conversation ID 1 between me and Rick. We also have conversation 2 between me, Rick, Morty, and Summer. And then as you can imagine, maybe there's some other messages between you and the single people, whatever. So this will go ahead and grab all of those. What we'll probably go ahead and do is we'll sort these by like newest message or something. I don't know if Twitter has a limit on only 10, but these will probably be sorted eventually by which one has the newest message or which one has unread messages or something along those lines. But for now, this is going to go ahead and do it for this episode. I got everything I wanted done. That way next episode, we can go ahead and hop back into the front end and get that modal working. We can go ahead and populate all the different conversations we have. We can go ahead and create a conversation and then hopefully be able to start creating messages in the episode after that. So that being said, everyone, I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Everything helps out here in the YouTube algorithm. If you guys do want to see all of the videos, there's a playlist hopefully linked down below, or you should be able to find it pretty easily, that starts from absolutely nothing to get to the point we are now. And as always, guys, I hope you have a great day. This has been Ethan Uncoder, and I'll see you in the next episode.